Hello and welcome to the Society with Fatma Shaheen at PTV World. October, as we all know, is of course celebrated to be Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and in this regard, as an attempt of course to create awareness regarding this very disease, today we'll be talking about breast cancer as it does exist in the Pakistani society. More particularly, we'll be talking about the disease itself, we'll be talking about its causes, we'll be talking about the treatment options that anybody has, the challenges that people often face when it comes to treating the disease, and last but not the least, the very unfortunate socio-cultural taboos which surround this disease, which make it very difficult to talk about this disease per se. In this regard, it's very important to mention at the outset that 1 in every 9 women in Pakistan unfortunately falls victim to this disease, which is that of breast cancer. And of course, there are studies to also suggest the fact that when we talk about Pakistan unfortunately happens to be one of those countries where the mortality rate of breast cancer is deemed to be the highest, more so in our region. Keeping this in mind, it's very important that when we talk about this disease, we do it in a holistic manner, we do it in an inclusive manner, and of course in a manner which is of course very survivor centric. Today we'll be talking about the role of the government, the role of the media, and of course the role of the civil society when it comes to creating community awareness, when it comes to creating sensitization regarding breast cancer. And to do this, let me introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for the show today is Miss Fariha Faisal, who is a cancer survivor herself. Assalamu alaikum, madam, and welcome to the show.
Walaikum assalam.
My second panelist for the show today is Dr. Amina Khan, who is a consultant surgical oncologist. Assalamu alaikum ji, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. And my third panelist for the show today is Umar Aftab, who's the CEO of Pink Ribbon. Assalamu alaikum, sir, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Well, to get the conversation started with you, Ms. Fariha, as a cancer survivor yourself, tell us that when we talk about diagnosing cancer per se, how did you do it in your case? Because we've seen categories of cases in these situations. There are those people, there are those women who say that they diagnose the disease in the course of getting routine medical checkups. Then there are those who say that they diagnose the disease because they actually experienced some serious symptoms. So in which category did your case fall?
I had a little bit of symptoms, so I just went to a doctor and just to get it checked. And then my doctor, he was worried to see all of this, and he said, I think you have to stay, you have to come again, and we have to do your biopsy. And at that time I didn't know what is biopsy and what is going on with me at that time. But then he made a file for me that you can go to hospitals in Lahore. So then I went to a hospital, and then they investigated further.
And then that's how it was discovered.
Yes.
But the thing is that then your case is probably the ideal case in which somebody experiences symptoms, somebody goes in for a timely checkup, and there onward they get diagnosed.
Yes.
Usually we see that is not the case. But Dr. Sabha, I think talking from your of course real life narrative as well, because of you get to treat so many of such patients, how do you see the trends evolving over a period of time? Because I, at least if I look at it from an objective bystander viewpoint, I feel that now people, more specifically young women at least, they are more aware, and now we see people in their 30s, women in their 40s, they are opting very voluntarily for mammograms and screenings.
So ideally, we would like breast cancer to be diagnosed at a stage where it can be picked up on the screening tests.
Right.
Now, there's very few diseases for which screening is advised in the medical world, and breast cancer is one of the most important diseases. And the reason for that is screening is done in healthy populations, in healthy individuals, before the onset of symptoms.
Right.
So it's someone who's walking around, got up in the morning, went to work, had their gym routine, went for a swim, came back, and then in the middle of their normal routine, they've scheduled in an appointment to go and get a mammogram done.
Right.
So there's no symptoms, there's no signs, they're perfectly healthy, but they're opting to check if there's any evidence of anything abnormal developing in the breast.
That's very rightly put by yourself, madam, because I think this is something that we do otherwise in our lifestyles as well for so many other diseases per se. But I still feel that, you know, there's still this taboo attached with it, you know, even with people who are educated, even with women who do belong to, you know, perhaps the upper middle class or elite families, even them I've seen, they've even had arguments with their, you know, like mothers and fathers that, you know, if they're going for mammograms, that can possibly have an, you know, adverse effect, the radiation that can be harmful for them. Sir, I think coming to you, your work in this regard is of course very commendable. You've made a niche for yourself in this regard because, you know, you've started all these very important awareness campaigns, and then of course you've also, you know, launched this breast cancer hospital last year. But when we talk about making the common Pakistani person aware, how aware do you feel is that common man out there when it comes to, you know, talking about this disease, when it comes to of course diagnosing it, and then of course seeking treatment as well?
What we have done is that we have got included the issue of breast cancer in the Lady Health Worker program.
Right,
so Lady Health Workers are trained on breast cancer, and they, because we have more than 100,000 Lady Health Workers across Pakistan, they are at the very grassroots level, they are placed at the BHU and a community level. So that we have seen as a first point of contact for any rural household.
Very right.
Then in lots of our campaigns, like last year, we, with courtesy of PTA, we got this ringtone converted.
Right. And I think that was such an intelligent, rather effective way, because, you know, this way you're reaching out to the common person out there, regardless of gender, regardless of their class, regardless of anything, because if not anything, anybody would think twice when they hear that ringtone, on which I'll come to you. I think we must also talk about the very, you know, pertinent role, rather imminent role of caregivers, and I think this is something which more often than not do ignore. So I remember you telling me that, you know, when you were diagnosed, you had a very supportive family system, your husband was there by your side, and, you know, you were diagnosed a few months after your basically marriage. So how important is it, you know, for any cancer patient, any cancer survivor as well, because this is something which we more often than not we see, you know, lacking in the society?
I am lucky enough that I have a very good support system around me, and I am surviving this disease just because of my husband, because he's always there and he's constantly, even now, he look after me, and he just keep on telling me, now you have to control your diet, now you have to rest. So these small things actually add a lot of value into your life. And self-love is also important, but if somebody is pushing you, no, you have to look after yourself, no, you have to, you know, now you have to eat certain food, you know, look better.
It's a constant reminder.
Yeah, it's a constant reminder.
Right.
And caregiver, to all caregivers, I must say that you must support the cancer patient because they are already going through a lot.
Madam, coming towards you, I would like to, you know, quote the statistics of this report I came across. It suggests that, you know, women in Pakistan are more prone to aggressive forms of cancer, and younger women, I think this is something we earlier discussed as well, are now more prone to getting breast cancer. So do you agree with the findings of this report?
So it's very interesting because breast cancer is not a single disease. It seems like it's a conglomerate of disease. And we do see that the spectrum of patients that we encounter in our region is a little bit different from the kind of patient that we see in the Western population in Europe or in North America. Over here in Southeast Asia, the disease seems to start taking a foothold in the 30s. And we see the highest incidence of breast cancer in the decade of the 40s and then going up into the 50s.
Why so? Why so? Like, do you attribute, you know, certain kind of, I don't know, how would science explain this? Because that is kind of very unfortunate.
It is actually, but the interesting thing is that breast cancer has a lot of fantastic treatments available. So it's not a cancer where you would kind of give up and say, okay, so, you know, there's not much we can do for the patient or treatment is really hard, because in the last 2 decades or so, breast cancer has had the most research and our treatments are really, really successful.
Of course.
So alhamdulillah for that, the disease is one of those cancers where treatment options are available and most of the patients do very, very well.
But madam, that is on the supposition that, you know, they detect it timely.
Yeah,
that
so
is very
the younger
important.
people have to be very vigilant. Mammograms as a screening tool will pick up cancers starting 40 and above. So in the decades in the 40s and in the 50s, that's when it's most effective. In our younger people, it's very important to have regular self-examinations, and for people who have family histories or who are considered to be high risk, they need to go in for evaluation with doctors and checkups, regular checkups with doctors.
So at the end of the day, you know, one way or the other, I think routine checkups, routine mammograms, routine screenings, that is the way forward.
I think healthcare is very important.
Healthcare is very important, and that is something,
to look after yourself.
of course, that is something which would apply across the board. So coming towards you, last year I understand you inaugurated this really good hospital. I remember the Chief Justice of Pakistan, he actually inaugurated the hospital, the breast cancer hospital, which basically aims to provide people with a lot of facilities, that too, you know, in a cost-effective manner, and of course under one roof. So how does this all work for the benefit of the audience, if you could explain?
So Pink Ribbon is setting up a dedicated breast cancer hospital. This will just specialize in breast cancer. We have already started the OPD and the diagnostics, and I think in next 6 to 8 months we will be providing chemo and surgery as well.
Right.
And this is free of cost for everyone. And adding to your last question, I think there are now lots of studies which suggest that 40% of cancer risk can be reduced with lifestyle change.
Right.
So lots of food what we are eating.
I think that is also one of the reasons, Madam, you would want to comment on this further, why younger people are now getting, you know, more.
It's a combination of genetic factors interacting with environmental factors. And when we talk about environmental factors, it does entail everything that we're eating, what we're inhaling,
what kind of physical activity we have,
how much exercise we're getting.
Right.
So I think how much sleep we're getting.
But
so
madam,
all of
how
that
strong are
factors
genetics here? Because then, you know, I have also come across studies which suggest the fact that, you know, only 5 to 10% cases can actually be attributed to, you know, people having a strong family history, because of which they actually, you know, have the inherent you know, that faulty cancer gene. So then how do you explain that?
So hereditary breast cancer is a completely different different subset of disease, because that is cancer in which we know, we have detected, we have identified genes which cause breast cancer, we identify them in breast cancer patients, and then we know their pattern of transmission. We know how they're going to go from one generation to the next and then to the next.
And I do understand there are some techniques now even available through which you can actually scan and see whether you have that cancer gene in you or
Absolutely. So the gene tests are available and you can tell if the patient has those particular genes. But then we don't know every gene that causes breast cancer. There may be so many more that are still hidden, and they have a propensity for causing this particular cancer in people. So I think that's what the research is doing. That's where we're headed, to try and figure out what predisposes one person to a cancer, to breast cancer, as compared to another one.
So sir, you've told me that, you know, that this breast cancer hospital that you know, have actually inaugurated last year, it is running, and of course it is catering to the needs of deserving patients, so to speak. But at the end of the day, you know, when we talk about people who need treatment, I understand that, you know, this can be a long process as well, and I think Dr. Saiba would agree with me on this. So then how do you bifurcate the different stages? Do you have all the equipment? Do you have all the services? Do you have enough doctors? Do you have enough psychologists? Because this then again also has a, you know, a psychological aspect to the disease too.
Well, you know, one center cannot address this. We can hardly maybe cater some portion of population from Lahore, but then what about the whole of Pakistan?
No, but I think it's a great initiative nonetheless that you've taken.
But for that we are partners with the with the Atomic Energy Commission. So they have their 18 centers across Pakistan, even in small places like Jamshoro, Nawab Shah, even in Swat. So we are partners with them, so we operate through them as well. So this center is just a model center in Lahore, but our campaign for last 20 years is a nationwide campaign across Pakistan.
I think that is your niche, sir, because you've been the pioneer of, you know, creating awareness about breast cancer, and you know, basically trying to do away with the typical unfortunate, you know, social cultural taboos we do attach with this disease, on which I'll come to you. I think it's very important that people like yourself who have suffered from the disease, they talk about it, because I think until and unless people like you you're open about it, you talk about it publicly. I don't think that, other people like you who do, fall victim to the disease, they don't get that courage and of course, that motivation. So what responsibility lies on cancer survivors that way to actually share their experiences and to be open about it, not, stigmatizing it, so as to motivate, people around them to talk about the same?
Generally, people with the cancer, those people who survive the cancer, they don't want to talk about it. As if I talk about myself, it would take like 9-10 years to actually, talking about the
but
disease.
I still think this is such a big thing because I'll say this, basically it was very difficult for me to actually find a cancer survivor patient who was actually willing to talk about their experiences, that too on national television. So I think this is something for which you must be given due credit and of course appreciation too.
Yes, but I would suggest to all the survivors that if they don't want to talk about it publicly, but at least see 4 or 5 people around you who are suffering from this disease, because it helps them, getting out of it.
Of course.
Because if you heard of that placebo effect, that is actually that when they see the patient, they see the survivor, so it's, give them that
it
willpower.
gives them, of course,
yes,
motivation, it gives them that strength to talk about it. And not only that, I think Faria, people like you, we've seen celebrities talk about it, those who've actually suffered from, different forms of cancer. And then I think you are also doing this amazing job in terms of running awareness campaigns, being part of different social media groups. So I think then the role just doesn't, limit to talking about it, on which I'll come to you, Dr. Saib. I think we must also talk about, of course, the advancements which have been made with regards to treatment of breast cancer per se. So how do you see the treatments and of course the procedures that we have today evolving over a period of time?
The biggest fear associated with breast cancer has been amputation of a body part. So mastectomy or losing the breast tissue because of disease is what causes a lot of concern to women and is probably what makes them hesitate to even seek treatment. That has changed dramatically in the last maybe 10 to 15 years or so. The majority of patients who undergo treatment for breast cancer now do not need a mastectomy. They do not need to remove the breast. In fact, we are saving the breast and providing treatments for them which are as effective and efficient in terms of controlling the disease. So surgery is one aspect of breast cancer treatment. And like I said, we're going towards minimalist surgery, saving the breast, lesser axillary dissections, lesser trauma that happens during surgery, and patients recover very, very well.
So would it be right to say, madam, then their focus then is more targeted? Whatever treatments you are giving, they are more targeted, they are more therapy-based per se.
So the other thing with mastectomy, losing the breast, is the aspect of reconstruction. So we have reconstruction available for patients in whom it is required that the breast tissue be removed. So that's an excellent option for patients. Chemotherapy or systemic therapy is also an important part where medicines are given to patients for the treatment of the disease. Radiation therapy again holds a very, very important part in the treatment of this disease. But the newest advancement now is in targeted treatments where we identify certain molecules on these cancer cells, and we have these excellent medications now that will go and target the cancer cell.
Which I think is the best thing, because
it is absolutely, because the side effects that we have from chemotherapy is because of all the damage that is happening to normal tissue. But with these targeted treatments, the side effects are minimal. And what we're achieving in terms of cancer death is maximum. So
but then again, madam, I think it goes back to the same thing which earlier Umar Saab also raised, that earlier detection is the key. You need to catch it earlier. What if, God forbid, the cancer has progressed a lot, it is a very aggressive form of cancer, it is perhaps, the last stage for the patient, then of course treatments like these wouldn't, be of much use. But coming to you, I think madam has raised some very, relevant points on which I would want you to deliberate further. I think a lot comes with, of course, getting oneself treated. Like she very rightly so pointed out that, with chemo, we do see a lot of side effects. We see that, patients often, they tend to, lose their hair and, they don't feel that attractive as well. So at the end of the day, considering that, you've also yourself gotten such treatments done, did they at any point in time impact you or your self-esteem, or for that matter, even your self-love in a way? Because of course, when you don't like the way you look, that does have a very, negative impression. on your, you know, both psychological and of course emotional well-being?
Yes, it affects you, but I would, because I passed my time, so it's easier for me to say. But to people who are going through it, I would suggest them that this is going to be a very temporary phase. Your hair is going to come back, your eyebrows are going to come back, so you just have to pass this difficult time. That better time is waiting for you, and it's still it's there.
You have to look at the greater good.
Yes, you have to, you know, look at the bigger perspective. This is just a temporary phase.
How did you get used to that? Because we want to learn from your experiences here, that, you know, how did you get used to having a different look of yourself, accepting it, and then of course moving on with that?
I overcome it with the mindfulness practices. I went to a program called Happiness Program, and there they said that you can control things from your mind and you can overcome your trauma. So I just overcome a lot of traumas, and now then I question a lot about to myself that what is the purpose of my life. So whatever I'm talking right now to you and to the people around me and the people who are suffering, so I believe I'm serving the purpose.
Of course you are, definitely.
So this is like, you know, I explored my life, that, you know, you cannot confine with few things in life.
I think counseling here, that has a very important role to play. On which, sir, I'll come to you. I think we must talk about, of course, counseling not only of the patient per se, but also of course of the families, because a lot of times we see that even if the patient wants to get treatment, they want to openly talk about it, they are stopped. And this is something I think we generally see in our society when it comes to, you know, mental illnesses as well, which, you know, unfortunately are still considered to be a very big taboo. So when it comes to counseling of families, how precisely do you feel can that be done?
First of all, we believe that survivor, of course, the patient is survivor, but the family is also a survivor, because all the family, they go through this whole trauma and what all the ups and downs. So that's, of course, I think generally for the patient, starting with the patient, because we have seen that after the diagnosis, many patients would not come back, they would not want to go for their treatment. It's very common. It's very common in Lahore. It's very common in all the even metropolitan cities. So starting from this point, motivating a patient to continue the treatment, and then of course at times, because we have seen that we received a call from a young girl. She attended one of our program in a college, and she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and her family, they just shut her in the house.
These are the type of cases I'm talking about.
So I think the one aspect we need to address is the patriarchal mindset of the society.
So your point is noted, on which I'll come to you, Faria. I think we must also, of course, talk about the very important role of media in this regard. That, you know, when we talk about, you know, educating people, why is it so important for the media, mainstream and of course otherwise, that, you know, the role of the media should be to sensitize and of course to educate people about the disease rather than to scare them off?
Yes, I believe they have to make more dramas where they are showing the survivor and the life of the survivor after the disease, that they are living a happy life.
Right.
They are enjoying their life, and they, you know, follow certain protocol, but they are living a happy life.
Sir, you wanted to add something to that?
Starting from a point when we launched our campaign in 2004, so all the media, they blacked out on this. They said that we can't take this B word on television. And coming to a point that for last 2 years and this year again, PEMRA is partners with us, so PEMRA has sent out a notification for all the private channels. Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, they are supporting us through PTV.
So
and
PTV very diligently every year does, you know, dedicates October to all these breast cancer awareness shows.
They wear pink ribbons the whole month of October.
The whole month of October,
there is a positive side as well, that we have come a long way. Yes, we are talking about it. We need to more strategize this thing. And then another thing is that with this single national curriculum, so we have been able to include some things in that as well. So in the mainstream curriculum, there will be some things taught during the course of education as well.
So your point is noted. You also wanted to add something to that, madam?
Yes, I think it's really important to break the stereotypical cancer module that we have in our minds. We take cancer as this monster, and then people who go through this disease, who fight this disease, and then eventually come out victorious, they have to be sort of absorbed into the society as productive citizens, as anybody else who's you know gone through something tough, but is now a giving member of this society.
Of
and you
course.
shouldn't just sort of make them stand out or let them feel any different from all of us who are part of this
Right,
great.
on which I'll come to you. I think we must talk about, you know, the very important role of social media, more so when it comes to sensitizing people, especially young women out there, so as to be more, you know, cancer aware, and of course in that regard conduct their own self-examinations if, for example, they don't have access to a doctor to do the same. So in this regard, what role do you feel can, you know, educational institutions play, colleges plays, you know, for that matter, even schools play when it comes to educating young girls out there to be more self-aware?
For this, in this regard, there are a lot of campaigns going on. Like in October, there is a whole month for the breast cancer awareness, and different platforms and different people, different organization arrange those awareness session. And plus, there are a lot of different brands who are also promoting the cancer survivors during this month. So we are in this way we are spreading a lot of awareness. And at my time there was no social media, and I don't have a good impression about the cancer itself. But with time, I believe people are more aware of it.
Their perceptions have changed.
Yes, their
basically.
perception have changed,
And
and
social
people
media,
are more aware of it,
of
just
course.
because of the awareness which we all are spreading.
Right, sir, and I understand that, you know, your organization in this regard is also being, you know, very active with regards to creating awareness amongst young girls, you know, by engaging school girls and of course, you know, college women when it comes to, you know, being more aware about the disease. So how do you, you know, practically conduct such, you know, awareness sessions?
Generally, we have a week of awareness at any particular college or university, and we distribute awareness material, we disseminate information, we hold awareness sessions. We even now run clinical examination camps as well at the colleges. And because we have seen in last few years that whenever we go to any college and they would tell us that maybe 1 or 2 of their girls got diagnosed with breast cancer, because unfortunately we are seeing young girls in their 17, 18 being diagnosed with
This is
breast
exactly
cancer.
what Madam was saying as well. Madam, but when we talk about, of course, looking out for the symptoms, you know, at the end of the day, there are some symptoms of this very disease which are not very easy to catch at the end of the day. So what message would you give to all the people out there that when it comes to actually identifying the symptoms and of course then timely seeking, you know, health interventions, medical checkups, what are the things that they need to look out for?
So there's one thing which is most important is to get into the habit of self-examination. Only when you're aware of yourself, when you're aware of what your baseline is, what your normal is, by a monthly self-exam, will you be able to notice any differences. And when differences are noted, they need to be notified to a doctor and help needs to be sought. The most important thing is the development of a lump. So if there's an area of hardness or an area of thickening or a small lump that develops in the breast, then that should raise an
alarm bell.
And absolutely it needs to be checked out. Besides a lump, there can be other things that breast cancer presents as also. If there's a rash that appears in the skin of the breast, these are particular things which cancer does. So it can come as skin changes, it can come as a redness or a rash, it can come as nipple erosion. Bloody discharge which comes from the nipple can be a sign of breast cancer. Similarly, lumps that appear in the breast as well as in the armpit area, in the axilla, are also very important and need to be looked into.
Right. Madam, your point is noted, on which I'll come to you, sir. I think we must also talk about, of course, doing away with the social cultural factors, of course, the impediments which make it more difficult for people, especially for women, to actually seek, you know, timely treatment and, of course, to save their lives. So, if you were to make some suggestions, what are the things that you feel need to be done more in terms of, you know, changing our societal attitudes so as to, of course, you know, make it easier for women who do need help, who do need support, to actually reach out for the same?
There are lots of, I think we need to address the myths and misconceptions, because in our grassroots level in different areas, for example, in the southern Punjab, there is a common belief that that particular woman, she has done something wrong, and that's
Right.
how she has got this breast
This
cancer.
is something that you were earlier talking about as well. And Sarah, by that virtue, we've also seen a lot of women go to actually faith healers, to quacks for that matter, to people who are not qualified doctors, to actually seek treatment. So these are the things that we need to also target when we talk about, of course, you know, saving women from this menace. I think it's also very important that we talk about, you know, educating men. We talk about sensitizing men, because a lot of times the things that you earlier pointed out, you know, patriarchy, so to speak, the lack of hesitance to actually give, you know, the female members of their family the due support that they do need when they are actually suffering from cancer, that has to come from the male member of the family. So how do you feel, of course being a male yourself, can we actually educate men about this disease and do it in a way which is actually, you know, helpful for them in terms of not only understanding the disease but also being there, you know, for the female members of the family?
So when we run our youth program, so we run it across with young boys and girls, everyone, because again, and we in many cases we have seen, and many people would tell me that my son brought me your flyer from the school. So it's really important for starting from the very young age.
Of course.
And then because in our society, because decision makers are generally men, so if a female has to go, for example, for a checkup or a mammogram, what to talk about surgery.
Right.
So she will have to go with son or brother
Exactly.
or father or husband, and then the money comes from
Of course, the
male
health
members.
economics also, that also kicks in.
Exactly.
Right.
So money comes from the male members of the society. So unfortunately, yes, health is controlled by men in our society.
Right, on which I'll come to you, and coming towards the conclusion of the show, I think a lot of focus needs to be placed in our Pakistani society on rehabilitation of cancer survivors, and I think this is something that we don't talk about enough. We often talk about the struggles of such people, we often talk about the treatments, but we don't get onto the fact that how is it to rehabilitate back to life, going back to the normal life that you used to have. So from your own experiences, what advice would you give to all the people out there, more particularly women who have suffered from this disease and they have come out victorious, that how can they successfully rehabilitate themselves back into their lives?
There is a lot of support available. There are a lot of support groups on Facebook where you can talk about your journey, and there are people who are supporting me. I have a lot of people around me who are supporting me, and I am supporting them.
Right.
So that is one way. And the second way is please don't live in a denial. If you are saying that we don't have any depression and we don't have any anxiety, so sorry, it's a very rare. if actually it's so
you need
have
to no, that's very rightly put by yourself.
You have to come out of this denial.
You basically need to then seek, of course, medical assistance as per, of course, your requirements that way. But I think at the end of the day, I think the stigma that surrounds this conversation, that needs to break, because I think one of the reasons why people are also hesitant to seeking any kind of support, be it psychological, be it social, be it from their family members, is because they feel that this is really stigmatized. Madam, coming towards you, what role can doctors like yourself play in, of course, doing away with this stigma? Because I do understand that people like yourself are in that position of power. You have a lot of influence on the patients and their families who actually come to you to get themselves treated. So what role can people like yourself play in, of course, helping them break free from this taboo?
So I think that's where counseling comes in, and a lot of professional help is needed in that regard. I think support groups are extremely important, and not just support groups which are run for the patients, because that is also important. A newly diagnosed cancer patient gets to interact with someone who's in the middle of treatment, and then we have survivors, people like Faria, who are there to tell them that 10 years down the road, this is what your life is going to be. But besides that, I think the most crucial time is when we're breaking the news of cancer to the
I was
patient.
about to come to that, because I
Right.
think this is a very important, rather very relevant part of today's conversation, because is there any kind of a breaking the news protocol? Because I think here people like yourself are in a very tricky position, because at one point you need to tell the patient about, of course, the disease that they are suffering from, but you need to do it in a way which is, you know, compassionate, which is sensitive, which of course doesn't hurt them, because of course, you know, their entire life changes in the blink of an eye. So how can you, you know, particularly strike that balance?
So there are guidelines that we follow when we're breaking bad news, and there's this entire program where we train our juniors and we train our fellows and residents in how to break bad news. It's something really technical. It's not just a random conversation that will happen with the patient who's sitting in your clinic. And it has to be addressed very carefully. We do want that the patients are there with a few members of the family or friends or someone who's close to them, but not a whole crowd,
Right.
because that also takes away from it. And I think the most important thing is to be realistic. Patients want to know what they're going to be dealing with, and they
Right.
also want to know what the journey is going to be like.
And this is something that you told me
Yes.
about earlier as well, that, you know, your doctors, they were very smart about it, the
Yes.
way they told
Told
you.
you.
You know, of course, because it's your basic right to know what kind of, you know, disease you're suffering from, and, you know, what particular treatments are you getting from it. But it needs to be done in a very sensitive, a very, you know, thoughtful manner.
Yes. In my case, was a very thoughtful process because to me, it's in, you know, in very parts. I get to know about my disease in parts. But in journal in Pakistan, the whole family know about the disease, but the patient, him or herself, didn't know about anything about
Right.
what they are going through, you know.
Which is unfair on them,
This is very unfair,
basically.
but in most of the, in case of cancer, I believe, I know they tell everything to the patient first and then the family.
And to conclude today's show, so I think we must also talk about, of course, the very important initiatives that, you know, your organization is taking, but of course with the support and with the help of the government as well, because the government, we've seen that has also played a very important role, of course, when it comes to raising community awareness. But in this regard, you know, moving away from, you know, community awareness, what kind of positive and affirmative action has been taken, or it needs to be taken, when we talk about, of course, not only tackling this disease, but of course, you know, moving forward and, you know, giving people the due treatment that they need?
So we, for example, we are partners with Higher Education Commission, so we reach out to all the colleges, universities across Pakistan. For last 3 years, President House is, you know, supporting the campaign. And then we are working at 2 strategic levels. For example, for prevention, so we are working with the Food Authority to get ban on such ingredients, food items which are cancerous and which shouldn't be used in the food we are having.
Which are harmful for health.
Exactly. And on the other hand, for the treatment, so we are working with the government at different level. We are trying to have mammogram facility at the district headquarter
Right.
hospital level, and then we are also working with the government to have breast clinics at different teaching hospitals. For example, we have recently partnered with Services Hospital to start one-stop breast
great,
clinic,
basically.
and then we so because being a civil society organization, we can bring in expertise, we can bring in some models, but at the end of the day, we need to have the support of the
Of
government
course,
to reach
basically.
out to the mass.
And of course, as they very famously say, you know, it's a very famous proverb that, you know, 2 minds are of course better than 1 that way. And I think it's a win-win for everybody at the end of the day, because you're just not looking at the awareness aspect, you're equally focused on the service delivery, which of course is the need of the hour. Because at the end of the day, I think a very important concern when it comes to treating breast cancer is to actually get not only timely intervention, but also affordable intervention. So I think that again is a very pressing concern.
True. We are working with government, for example, with FBR to see that how can we lower the price of the treatments available, the molecules which are not available. We are working with DRAB to have those molecules available. So it's when from the day first when we started our campaign, we were always very mindful that we don't want to just create a scare, but we need to provide solution as well.
Of
so
course.
that's why we were from the very beginning we have been working with the government hand in hand to.
And let's hope that that this momentum definitely continues. On which note, I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, Fariha. Thank you so much, Dr. Saiba, and thank you so much, Omar Saab, for being here with us today. Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about breast cancer as it does exist in the Pakistani society. We also spoke about the changing trends. In this regard, we must not forget the fact that unfortunately Pakistan is one of those countries which has the highest mortality rate, especially in the region when it comes to this very particular disease. It's very important for us to break all taboos, to talk about this disease, and of course just not talk about the disease but also have a more forward-looking approach towards it, especially when it comes to treatment, and of course by that virtue accepting cancer survivors too. There needs to be massive community awareness, and this should of course also include men as much as it includes women, because at the end of the day nobody can save you until and unless you save yourself. Early detection is the key. Thank you for watching The Society. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.